All right, well, it's 5:31, and if it's okay with you, Luba, I think we'll get started. Just a few
Sure.
quick things before I hand things over. Quick note, today's meeting is being recorded. At the bottom of your screen, you will see two buttons you can use. There's going to be a Q&A button. At any point, if you have a question you'd like to ask, go ahead, click the Q&A button and send in the question, and we will review them as they come in and either address them immediately or address them at the question and answer session later on, depending on where it fits. If you're more comfortable speaking rather than typing, when we do open up the Q&A, you can also use the raise hand button, at which point we'll reach out in the order that those hands come in and unmute you and allow you to talk. And with that, let me hand things over to VHB's Luba Zieva.
Thank you, Matt. Welcome, everyone, to our virtual public input meeting tonight for Burlington Graham Metropolitan Transportation Plan update, Getting There 2045. Thank you all so much for taking the time out of your busy evening in between juggling responsibilities with work and family and trying to cook dinner possibly to learn more about this long-range transportation plan vision for the region. So again, we really appreciate your time. So we're going to start with some introductions. Just introduce our panel of speakers today, and then we'll review the plan process and some of the draft recommendations, and also give you an opportunity to learn more about how you can provide your feedback. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Luba Zueva, Senior Transportation Planner with VHB. We are part of the studies team. We've been working on this plan update with the MPO staff since last spring, and we are happy to be here with you all today. And my contact information will be on the last slide after we go through the presentation today. So if you have some follow-up questions after the presentation tonight, feel free to also reach out at a later point. With that, I'm going to let Juanetta Amalet introduce herself as well from the MPO staff.
Hey, good evening, and thank you for attending tonight's Burlington Graham MPL's first virtual public meeting. I'm Juanetta Millette. I'm the Burlington Graham MPO administrator, and I'm so excited about using this new platform to share information with you. I ask that you follow the project on our website, gettingthere2045.com, to learn more about the Metropolitan Transportation Plan update and to complete the survey and provide any additional comments that you may have after tonight's presentation. With that, I'll turn it over to VHB. But again, thanks much for joining us.
Thank you, Juanetta. Joe, if you don't mind introducing yourself also.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Seymour. I'm a transportation planner with VHB. Some of you may have met me at the first public event meeting back in, I believe it was July of 2019. So it's nice to see you all again. I'll be coming into the later half of this presentation to describe the interactive map and the public survey process. Thanks.
Great. And also, Sherry, if you don't mind introducing yourself also.
Well, I don't have a long speech like Joe, but I'm a transportation planner, Sherry Dawson, transportation planner at VHB, and I assist with the public involvement for this study.
Thank you, Sherry. With that, I'll go ahead and get started on our slides today. So this is our public input meeting number 3. We are on the finished stretch of this long-range transportation plan update. So today, the main purpose for this meeting is to provide you an update on where we are in the long-range transportation plan update process. We'll review some of the draft recommendations from the plan. We'll invite you to participate in a Q&A session to see what questions might be out there for the study team. And then we'll just let you know how else you can participate and provide feedback. We are starting the public input process for this plan between now and June 11th, where we're inviting the public to submit their comments regarding the draft plan and recommendations so we can make some adjustments as needed prior to the plan adoption. To review the timeline for the plan, so again, we are kind of getting ready to be on the final stretch of this plan, but we started last spring with some data gathering. We have formed a steering committee for this plan, and they have been instrumental in giving us some direction and input in terms of developing the vision, goals, and objectives for this plan update. We also did a variety of additional public outreach initiatives. And we also started with some stakeholder interviews back in May and June of last year. That was very helpful to learn some additional information about the region and where some of the deficiencies and gaps might be in terms of providing access to key community resources for members of the public who might have a harder time just getting around the region right now. So we are again towards the end of this process. We are in our public input meeting number 3, and we are expecting that the plan adoption will take place at the MPO Transportation Advisory Committee meeting on June 16th. That meeting will also be open to the public. So the meeting itself with the TAC will provide another opportunity for public input where members of the public could call in if it's a call-in meeting at that point and speak up in public comment, or anybody can submit their public comment for the plan between now and June 11th, as already indicated. So just a quick overview of some of the past public input meetings and events we've had. So this is our 3rd public input meeting. We held a previous public input meeting number 1 on July 23rd. As Joe has mentioned, he was there as well. We showed people some existing conditions, maps and charts, and talked to attendees about some of the trends that they're seeing and some of the concerns. We had an online survey open in August. And then the 2nd public input meeting took place in January of this current year. The online the online survey we had back in August was in MetroQuest format, and we did receive a fair number of completed responses. Over 100 responses were received. And as you can see from this chart here, people from various parts of the community were represented. So not just Burlington and Graham, but other municipalities and parts of the region were also represented as well. Some of the things we heard through the online survey, for example, were things that are particularly important for residents and members of the community of this region to consider as we are developing this long-range transportation plan vision, preserving community character, so finding that balance between growth while also retaining your existing character, this charm with wonderful historic downtowns. Complete streets, so accommodating a variety of modes is also important, as well as connectivity, providing transportation mode options, optimizing existing infrastructure, so taking care of maintenance and not just building new roads, and then considering infill development, emerging technologies, and freight movement were also important as part of the public survey feedback received. Here's a couple photos from the last public input meeting that was held in January. So again, we were able to obtain some feedback regarding the draft recommendations list shared at that meeting. One of the important tools that the transportation planners use, and that was utilized for this long-range transportation plan update, is a travel demand model that allows us to take a look at the long-range forecast for how the transportation conditions might be changing in terms of congestion and the demand for travel in particular corridors. A travel demand model is more of a high-level tool. It might not give us very specific descriptive information about each single roadway, especially not about local roadways, but for major arterials and interstate highway system, it provides a pretty good indication of where we are expecting the travel patterns to be changing, for the demand to be increasing or decreasing. So this particular map shows a snapshot of where the travel demand model was showing the region would be by 2045, given the expected population and employment growth. This is another map illustrating the output for one of the scenarios that was considered. 2 scenarios were developed. One was more heavily weighted towards optimizing our transportation infrastructure through modernization projects, more intersection improvements, more turn lane type projects, and fewer roadway widenings. So as a result of this particular scenario, you could see how some of the expected traffic flow would change. Areas that are yellow, maybe orange and red would be the areas that are still expected to have some congestion concerns. And you can see how some of the interchange areas and intersections might show up in red or darker orange, even if they're part of a corridor that's highlighted in green. So some of the intersection and interchange locations are those pinch points where we see that there might be some additional congestion concerns. Another point of information that transportation planners can consider is some of the real-time data that we can now obtain from cell phone records. And this particular map illustrates some of the data for 2018. So this is not looking out to 2045. Obviously, we don't have the crystal ball to show us what the real-time data will be in 2045. But based on 2018 conditions, it kind of gives us an indication that there are some existing congestion challenges on some of those key north-south corridors connecting between US 70 and I-40. So those might be some of the areas where you'll have a little bit of a traffic backup, especially at intersections. Possibly left turning vehicles might be slowing down the through movement of traffic, and therefore you're seeing those slowdowns in travel speeds. And so in some cases where we see the travel demand model might not be fully descriptive of the congestion impacts of those intersections, that's where it's nice to also have an additional piece of supporting information, such as here, real-time data from cell phones. So as part of the project selection for this plan, again, we worked with the steering committee to help us develop the vision, goals, and objectives for this plan. And then they also helped us develop the selection criteria to identify which projects are particularly important to support the future growth and development of this region. This is a growing region. People are enjoying the quality of life here, and that's expected to continue. That new households will be moving here, possibly young families, but also some retirees. And then people do travel both within the region, but also to some of the job centers outside of the region. So the travel will continue to increase, and then the jobs inside the region will also continue to increase. So all of that, this economic development is expected to continue. And as part of the project selection, we took into account not just the congestion, as already illustrated in the travel demand model maps, but also some of the other factors such as cost benefit that basically speaks to how expensive per mile are some of the improvements that are needed. And in some cases, it's a lot more expensive to widen a roadway from a 2-lane to a 4-lane median divided versus just adding some left turn lanes at key intersections. So that can be a more cost-effective measure. Safety was also considered. Economic development basically speaks to whether or not a particular improvement would serve an area that is expected to add a higher number of jobs between now and 2045. And then multimodal score in areas where we're seeing that a roadway project would overlap with recommendations for bicycle and pedestrian improvements, and that particular project connects to activity centers that are more prone to generate the demand for walking and bicycling. Those projects would also get additional points as part of roadway project selection methodology. So taking all of those factors into account, we were able to select a draft list of recommended projects, which are now posted for public comment as part of this draft plan review. And another factor that we also had to consider is the fiscal constraint. You can kind of think of it as a filter or a budget, just like every household has to balance their budget, balance their checkbook. There's a federal requirement for this particular type of long-range transportation plan. A metropolitan transportation plan has to be fiscally constrained. So we looked at the past trends in terms of statewide and federal funding that has been available for transportation projects in this region, and we projected that funding going forward out to 2045. And then we had to make some assumptions, obviously, about some of the growth in both funding available and the project cost. And then with that in mind, that became our budget filter against which we had to compare the potential projects. And then some of the projects made it into the what we're calling the fiscally constrained list, and some of the projects are still considered important for the future of the region, but they will remain shown as unfunded projects for this MTP. They can still be carried forward as part of the comprehensive transportation plan or other plan updates and considerations. They're just not currently being shown in the funded fiscally constrained list. So again, this is just like balancing the budget. When we were working on the fiscal forecast, we divided this fiscal forecast out to 2045 into 3 funding categories: the statewide mobility, the regional impact, and the division needs categories. And that kind of mirrors the process that the state currently goes through, the STI strategic prioritization process, to allocate funding for projects in the state transportation improvement program, which is typically a 10-year program with projects that actually have committed funding by funding type assigned. And the categories highlighted with the red circle or oval, regional impact and division needs categories. Those are the categories where the MPO governing body, the TAC, has more say in terms of how to allocate local input points for those projects. And the statewide mobility, currently the way that the process functions, the MPOs submit projects, but they have less opportunity for local input. This chart illustrates the multiple layers of transportation planning and project development steps that have to occur to actually bring a project to construction. So before you can actually start breaking ground on a new transportation project, there's many steps involved, and one of them is including a project in a long-range transportation plan. There's a statewide transportation plan that's a long-range plan. There's a CTP, which is a comprehensive transportation plan, not fiscally constrained. And MTP is slightly more limited because it is a fiscally constrained plan. And then once a project is identified in one of those long-range plans, you're trying to get the project matched up with funding sources in your state transportation improvement program. And once that occurs, then you can start working through project development, engineering design, some of the environmental documentation, right-of-way acquisition before the project can go to construction. So all of that to say is, it is a very long process. If you see a project that's included on the draft MTP plan today, that doesn't necessarily mean that the project will take place tomorrow. There's still likely to be a pretty long time in between identifying a new project in a long-range transportation plan and actually bringing it to construction. And I've already talked to you a little bit about the project selection methodology, but I also wanted to mention a few of the other factors that were considered as part of the roadway project selection. It appeared very important to the study team as part of working with the steering committee, through stakeholder interviews, from the staff feedback that US 70 as a corridor connecting communities is one of those really important regional corridors. Also improving access to the interstate I-40, I-85 corridor. So again, those north-south corridors that you saw highlighted in one of the previous maps. Anytime we can make improvements or new interchanges at I-40, I-85, and then connecting those roadways leading up to those existing or future interchanges, that's likely going to support the future growth and development of the region, make sure that our freight can also move seamlessly across and through the region. In the urban core, so kind of looking at the center of the region, especially Burlington and Graham, there's a lot of opportunity for modernization of corridors. So as I was mentioning earlier, sometimes adding left turn lanes can be more cost effective than widening a road. And in some of those cases, we might also consider medians or other access management treatments to make corridors safer, where they might already be wide enough to carry the current and expected volumes of traffic, but there's some additional safety, traffic flow improvements, some multimodal and complete streets improvements that can be done to really make them better roadways to serve all users in a safe way. And then there have been a couple recent corridor studies completed in the region, including Maple Avenue corridor study and NC54 corridor study. So we thought that implementation of at least parts of those recently adopted corridor studies would be beneficial to support the region's growth and development. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Joe to review the current list of recommendations. I think I'm gonna allow Joe to advance the slides. Thanks, Joe.
All right, thank you, Luba. So as Luba mentioned, my role in the next couple slides is to go over a summary of the project listings in the draft MTP, and then give you an idea of how to navigate through the online map, how to complete the survey, give you an idea of the bundle of projects that the group has come up with over the last couple months. So the first thing I would encourage you to do, either during this webinar or in the time afterwards, is to be able to view the interactive map and complete the survey. So if you go to the website bgmpo-gettingthere2045.com, you'll see there's a tab called Interactive Map. You'll want to click that link, and you'll be able to explore the map, which we'll get to in a moment. The next thing you want to do is, after you review the projects, we want to encourage you to click the Get Involved tab and then fill out the survey. We'll go through both of those steps in a moment. So once you go through the BGMPO gettingthere245.com interactive map tab, you'll enter this screen. And this is an ArcGIS online interactive map that allows you to toggle through a number of different settings to explore the draft projects that are part of this project. So one thing you'll want to do first is on your map legend in the left-hand side of your screen, that looks like a stack of pancakes. You want to click that and you'll be able to toggle on and off the different layers. The layers you'll specifically want to look at are the Scenario 1 fiscally constrained preferred scenario lines and points. Lines are roadway projects or sidewalks or shared use paths, while points are things like interchanges, intersection improvement projects. So with these functions enabled, you'll be able to scan through and look at the specific projects in your community or in the MPO's area wide. Here's an example of a zoomed in view of the map. So once you've gotten to the interactive map, you're panning around. One thing I want to point out is this is a project, I know it's come up during a number of the public meetings, is the Medman bypass, or the this is a mistype here, NC 119 bypass here on the right-hand side of your screen in the eastern area of the in the eastern side of the study area. So again, you'll see here the dots and lines. The dots again represent interchanges or intersection improvements that may be operational, signal improvements, what have you, whereas the lines are roadway widenings or modernizations, addition of turn lanes or medians, or may also be may represent shared use paths or sidewalk projects. My apologies, I've jumped out of the presentation view into the slide deck. Let me go back to that. So in terms of describing the draft project types, there are roughly 100 odd projects that are part of the draft MTP that you'll be able to view and comment on. The plurality of those projects represent interchange and intersection projects. Throughout the public engagement process and our technical review, we identified that these were potentially the biggest bang for the buck and that address safety and efficiency at key intersections. And you can see those here identified in the dash box. The next thing we noticed was that about 32 or about half of those 32 projects that were identified as roadway improvements were actually modernization projects. So we're not focused so much on widening or new roadways, but rather modernization, so the inclusion of medians or turn lanes to make our existing roadways more efficient and safe. What I also wanted to point out is about more than a dozen of these projects are focused on bicycle, pedestrian, and transit projects, and these include new buses, park and ride facilities, and multi-use paths. Now, another way to look at these projects is by their estimated cost. So one thing I want to point out is that certainly those projects in the roadway section, those new roadways, widenings, and modernization projects do represent a larger amount of the estimated costs. I do want to point out, though, the bicycle, pedestrian, and transit represents about 9% of the overall estimated cost, which is significantly larger than one would expect in MTP, which does reflect the area's focus on connecting people to places, people to businesses, and incorporating transit and not relying solely on the roadway to do that. Now, I did want to point out something here. So certainly roadway is a larger, represents a larger portion of the estimated costs, but a significant portion of that is the NC 119 bypass. So once we take that out, since the project is under construction, we see more of a balance between roadway improvements, intersection interchange, and bicycle and pedestrian and transit projects. Here's an example of the zoomed in interactive map where we flagged the transit, bicycle, and pedestrian projects. So when you're in the interactive map, you'll be able to pan around and click on the specific projects. You'll be able to see the extent, so from where they begin to where they end, the project code, as well as the description of the project. Another thing we wanted to point out is that there were some project considerations that did not fit within the fiscally constrained plan. Maybe because they did not score entirely well, or they didn't meet the current funding stream requirements, but we wanted to identify them nonetheless. And here are examples of a number of transit projects, transit improvements, some connector options, a route along NC 54 from Graham to Carborough, and some other service expansions that we wanted to make note of, but that are not within the fiscal constraints of the plan. This brings me to my final slide, where I want to direct you to the online survey. So once you've had the opportunity to go to the website and pour through the interactive map and look at the projects that interest you or that affect you, we'd encourage you then to go to the Get Involved tab and click through the survey. This survey is going to be open through June 11th, and it is, you can take it on your computer, or you can also do it on your phone. I pulled it up previous to this webinar and it was native to the phone. I was able to screen through, and it's only about 6 or 7 questions, which you can complete in under 10 minutes if you're really time constrained. The other option is you can also review the plan. If you don't feel like completing the survey, you can also send an email to Luba, who spoke at the beginning, with your plan comments. You can also review the project website for updates that will be posted as we're moving through this process. And as always, please share the survey and the interactive map with your neighbors, your friends, and community members as we look to get more input through June 11th. All right, Luba, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Thanks, Joe. I just want to make one more comment about one of the slides that Joe shared, the transit project slides. And let's see, I wonder if I can go back to the transit table. Just to highlight that those particular transit projects, that would be new transit routes, they are considered important. However, at this point, we cannot demonstrate that they would fit within the fiscal constraint of the plan due to the fact that operating expenses for transit are expected to be shared with local governments at 50-50 cost share. So even if you have some federal funding coming into the region to provide a portion of the operating expenses, there is still a significant portion of the operating expenses for those potential new or expanded transit routes that have to be borne by the local jurisdiction. And so that does present a significant barrier to implementing those new transit routes or transit route expansions. However, we do think that for the most part, those transit route service improvements would be beneficial to the region. And so if the fiscal constraint was not an issue, we would certainly recommend them for this plan. And probably NC 54 connector route might have the least ridership potential currently, but the other routes we think would all be very beneficial, including the Graham circulator, Mebane circulator, and ACC to Mebane connector option, and of course part route for the existing express bus route, expanding the service on that route to make it more frequent would certainly benefit a number of riders who are having to commute longer distances outside of the region right now. With that, I'm just gonna pull up the website to show you one more time where to find the survey. And I think that Joe has already shared that, but just to make sure that everybody's familiar. So I'm gonna share the screen again. So again, Getting There 2045 website. One second. I think I'm sharing the wrong screen. I'm gonna go back to the website and then share the screen again. All right, so this is the home page, and if again from the home page you can go straight to the interactive map, or here you can go under documents to actually review the draft plan document, or just the fiscally constrained recommendations table. That's a smaller document to download. The full plan might take you a minute to download, about 12 megabytes. And then at the top, under the Get Involved options, that's where for today, we have the virtual public meeting session information posted, and then this is where the public survey link resides as well. So again, you can click on this, take the survey today, and it will take you to a fairly simple Google form that will review and request some feedback regarding the plan overall, and then roadway, transit, and bicycle and pedestrian projects specifically. And then you can add more comments, and you can also choose to identify or not which community or municipality of residents best describes you. And of course, you can also say that you live outside of BGMPO, but you might work here, or you are a stakeholder with one of the local agencies. And that's why you'd prefer to fill out the survey. So again, as Joe has mentioned, the survey is pretty short and straightforward. So we encourage everybody to, if you have time, to go online, check out our interactive map, check out the draft plan document, and then fill out the survey, or just send us your public comments. And I think with that, we are ready for the Q&A session, I believe.
Well, on behalf of the Burlington Graham MPO, I'd like to thank you again for joining us for our first virtual meeting. And to let you know, this is our third and final public input meeting that we'll schedule to garner your feedback on our future transportation improvements and future financial investments. The Transportation Advisory Committee is expected to adopt the final plan at their June 16th meeting. And the final plan will be posted at the Burlington Graham MPO's website, and that's www.bgmpo.org. Again, thank you for coming, and you can send any additional comments that you may have posted to our website, the project website, that's the 2045gettingthere.com. And I'll turn that back to Lubita for final remarks.
Thank you, Juanetta. I just wanted to make sure I bring up the slide again with our contact information in case somebody did want to send us an email instead of filling out the online survey. So again, here's an email for Juanetta and I, and you're welcome to contact us directly, or again, fill out the survey. And you can submit public comments anytime between now and June 11th, and then additional public comments will also be, you can also provide those in person or via phone during the TAC meeting on June 16th. So thanks so much for your time today. Again, taking time out of your busy day and juggling many responsibilities, I'm sure. We really appreciate your effort, and check the website for the updated plan once it's approved and adopted. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luba.